Hi, Mary Sherwood Savinsky here. So happy you could join me for another interview tip. Interviewing is an important part of the job searching process, and it really does require a lot of preparation, as you're probably getting the idea of, since I do have a number of tips already posted, and we'll be adding more over the coming weeks. Um, First, a little bit about me. I'm an occupational consultant, career expert, and author. I work with folks all over the world. I just got a client out in Singapore, believe it or not. So it's very exciting for me to be able to work with so many different cultures and expectations, and of course work with plenty of folks right here in the United States, and I'm happy to do that as well. Um, you will see on the slide, if you download this presentation, that I have a number of free resources and links on the second and last slides in the presentation. And I hope you'll take advantage of those. And it shares a little bit more information about me, but also, more importantly, some links that will help you in the job search process and give you some resources and additional articles that you can consult about wherever you are in the process and whatever skills you need to acquire to do better in your interviewing or your job searching, and getting you back on your feet and into your next job or your better job if you're already working. I've been working in this industry for about 20 years. I work with managers, babysitters, college grads, moms, retirees returning to the workforce, truck drivers, managers, sales, IT folks, you name it. I work with just about any industry you could think of. I already have or would be more than thrilled to do, and I really work hard to make sure to understand what your industry requires and what your particular goals are before making recommendations or developing a resume for you. And I think that's very important, but you'll see more on the slides, as I say, if you download this presentation. But you can always access free resources on www.jobsearchfortherestofus.com, all one word, or from my website, life-works.info. And there you also see an area where you can download my soon-to-be published ebook, Job Search for the Rest of Us. And I hope you'll check that out. There's a number of free downloads there for you as well. So without any more ado, I guess we'll go ahead and get started and talk about our fourth tip for interviewing, which would be visiting the location ahead of time. And that's something that's pretty important to do, and you'll see why as we talk about it. First, a little bit about the tips we've already talked about. We've talked about practicing, actually over-preparing for an interview and why that's important. We've talked about taking notes and being prepared with questions ahead of time, and how exactly to go about doing that so you can look organized and composed during an interview. That's very important. Also, we spoke about wearing appropriate and, more importantly, perhaps, comfortable clothing. It won't do you much good to dress up in a nice outfit if you're not going to be feeling comfortable and confident in it. So it's very important to select and test out the appropriate attire before you go to an interview. Similarly, it's very important for you to go to the location of the interview the day ahead of time. Don't go too far in advance. If you go a week ahead of time, you may not be alerted to construction that started the day before or a couple of days before. So really, a day or two before the interview is ideal. That way you'll be aware of anything that might impede your travel time to the actual building location, or your travel, if it's in a large office building, from the ground floor to the office suite. So go ahead of time. Go the day or even 2 days ahead of time, and just take a look around and make sure that you know how to get where you're going inside and out. Now, you'll notice throughout these interview tips a running theme is confidence, and I'll say it a number of times during this session as well. It is very important that you feel confident when you come into an interview setting. You want to certainly put your best foot forward. And I think you know that, but you want to be confident enough to sell yourself to the employer. Because that's really what an interview is all about, is you selling the employer in a way that your resume cannot, on why you are the most ideal candidate for this job. And it's hard to do if you're not feeling confident. So if you go ahead of time, again, that'll help make you feel a little bit more confident. You'll be able to visualize the setting, and again, know that you're not going to take longer to get there, either inside or out, than you imagine it will. You want to arrive, calm, cool, and collected so that you look your best. You're working very hard to prepare and work ahead of time to practice your answers. Don't blow it by getting flustered because you're 5 minutes late due to traffic. Just go ahead of time. You'll be able to visualize the setting too, and just, eliminate that fear of the unknown and really, again, boost your confidence. Now, if it's a public location that you can actually go in, I would encourage you to take that extra step and access the building and go to the floor in this actual suite that you're going to. It might be a good idea to dress up a little bit just in case somebody remembers seeing you the next day and you don't want to stand out as a potential homeless person if you dress very casually. So dress business casual, at least, to do your reconnaissance if you're going inside the building. And you'll rest more peacefully just knowing, where exactly you're going and that you know how to get there. You won't have to worry about it, and it won't be a big question mark in your mind. And you might actually end up finding something to think about or to talk about during your interview too. You might be able to comment on a piece of artwork or something that you can note ahead of time and be able to ask about, to have more of a conversation during the interview, before or after. And that's something to think about too, because sometimes you will have to engage in some chit-chat before or after an interview. If you're interviewing with a couple of people, or if your interviewer is running late, you might end up in a casual conversation with somebody from the office who maybe even is asked to entertain you or to keep you a little busy while somebody gets there. It may also be part of the actual interview process. They may always get the receptionist to give input, or have a coworker just casually drop by to say hello and check you out. So be prepared for some, chit chat or small talk, if you will. Have something interesting to talk about or to say. Certainly, this is where your elevator pitch will come in handy, and that's a topic for another day, of course. But if you visit ahead of time, you'll have a little bit more to talk about there that may be more meaningful to the employer too. Now, if the building isn't accessible, you can still drive there, certainly, and be aware of any construction or twists and turns or unmarked roads that might come up on your path there. But you can go maybe during lunchtime or quitting time and get an idea of the culture and the setting a little bit by watching the people that come out and how they come out. What's their demeanor like? What's their group behavior like? Is everybody happily chit-chatting? Are there a bunch of people sullenly smoking cigarettes outside of the building at all hours, no matter what time you go there? You can get a lot of information that way, and positive and negative, but hopefully more positive, and again, give you something to talk to the employer about. But if nothing else, at least give you something to visualize so that you can feel better about what you're looking forward to. Sometimes when we don't know what to expect, our mind fills in the blanks with all kinds of concerns and question marks, and some people even come up with disaster scenarios, what if, and it's always negative. If you're one of those, certainly you want to go ahead of time, because this will really allay your concerns. And you'll feel more control over the situation. It's hard during an interview a lot of times because you aren't in control of so much. You have a general idea of what's going to happen, but really it's all in the employer's ballpark. So this can give you a little bit more sense of control if you're one of those people, and we all are to a certain extent, who like to have control over a situation. And one of the things that you can end up asking if you visit ahead of time is asking for a tour. That's actually one of my favorite ending interview questions, when the interviewer at the end, as they so often do, asks you, do you have any questions for us? And you can say, among other things, hey, how about a tour? I noticed, that you have a mezzanine overlook of the fountain and the courtyard, or whatever it is, just to kind of lend more purpose towards asking for a tour. I've never had or heard of an employer not having a positive response to requesting a tour. People like to talk about themselves, they like to talk about their company, they like to talk about anything that they can show off to you that makes them look good. And the more you can do that, the better off you're going to be. And if it comes down to it, and it's between you and another candidate, and they have a little bit of a warm fuzzy for you because you showed interest in getting a tour, among other things, then they're going to go with you. They may not know why. They may not say specifically, oh, Joan asked for a tour, so we should hire her. Not at all. I mean, they may do that, but it's doubtful. It's more likely that it's just going to add another point in your favor, and we can all use an added point in our favor, no matter who we are or what we're doing. So ask for a tour, and by having something specific to mention, it will seem even more natural. And again, I've never had an employer react negatively to requesting a tour, so that always works. You can add that to the list of questions you'll ask an employer, because that really works. So just to recap today's tip, visiting the location ahead of time, some of the things that you'll gain by doing so is, first of all, an increased sense of self-confidence, which you need during an interview to feel like you're selling yourself to an employer and to come across as knowing what you're talking about and being confident and capable. So, increased self-confidence. You'll determine more accurate travel and arrival times, find out about any missing signs, construction, poor signage, or elevators not working inside the building, so that you know exactly how long it will take, or about how long it'll take, or to allow for once you get in the building. That can also be important. You'll have additional conversational items. Be able to ask the coworker that casually stops by about the fountain, or just to comment on how nice that must be to be able to take a break and sit out there quietly next to the fountain, gather your thoughts, or whatever it is. It'll just give you a little something added. It'll give you a reason or excuse to ask for a tour, or at least make that question seem more natural and a little bit more, I don't want to say believable, but at least have a reason to ask for it, or at least anchor that request a little bit. So that's it for today's interview tip. Visit the location ahead of time, and I think I've given you quite a few reasons why it's important to just do that. And again, if you're downloading this, you'll see on the slide where I'm providing with a number of resources, articles, tips, and tricks for improving your interviewing and your job searching skills. So I do hope that you'll take advantage of that. We still have a few minutes, so I'm going to go ahead and answer a couple of questions that I also got shared in previous sessions, that I was getting a lot of questions about interviewing, which prompted this series of questions. But I do get other questions as well. So since we have a few more minutes left, I will go ahead and pull out one of those and address that. Let's see here. How do I explain an employment gap? That's a question that I get a lot, especially from the injured workers that I work with, or moms returning to the workforce, or dads. I get a lot of dads these days too. Or even military spouses that were unable to work during shorter term assignments, and so forth. So it does come up. one of the things that you can do that really does help is to take a more functional approach to your resume and use a skills-based resume, highlighting those skills and abilities over your work history. And this can really take away from any missing gaps that you might have. Hopefully you were doing something productive during the time that you are not working and can show participation in self-study or volunteer, or were active in a group or organization that you can indicate that you were working at, or working towards, or on, or involved with, and that will really help you. So just again, focus more on your skills, your abilities, and your strengths, what you have to offer the employer, versus necessarily your work history. You'll want to provide your work history, of course, but you can always entitle that section Select Work History, and just list those titles that are going to be most applicable to this job that you're applying to. Sooner or later, though, you do need to be prepared to address those gaps, because if you're hired, most likely you'll be asked to provide an application, and that's going to force you to provide dates. And so you'll need to be prepared to explain those gaps in your work history at some point. But you can minimize them on the outset by taking a functional or skill-based approach to your resume and just presenting select experiences. And that will really help at least get your foot in the door so that you can explain in further detail any gaps that you might have. And again, be ready to make them positive and to really share that you're not unemployable or not employed for a certain period for any reason other than a legitimate one, or one that can be explained. Let's see. How can I ask for time off during an interview? This is always tricky, and if you approach it right, it can come off well. The last thing you want to do is to give the employer the impression that you're lazy or you're slacker. You want to give the impression you're a go-getter and you're going to work hard for them, of course. I would not bring up during an initial interview, unless it's the hiring interview, that you need time off. But if, say, you already have a commitment for a prepaid vacation or a close family member's wedding, that sort of thing, you may want to mention that, or to ask in a way that communicates that you may have another commitment that you will need to address during that time. You don't want to blindside an employer right after starting. So it is important to give them a little bit of a heads up if you will be needing to take some time off. Be careful how you ask, of course, and you don't want to come across as being entitled or being lazy, certainly. So just carefully inquire about the prospect of, eventual time off, and you may very easily come up with a way to ask. For example, if your niece, and you're very close to your niece, is getting married in the next couple of months, or even if you don't have a date, you can, at a point that it becomes indicative, to say, my niece, who I'm very close with, is getting married within the next few months. I'm waiting for a date now. That's really the only thing that I have that I might need to request time off for, and I would certainly understand if it wouldn't be possible. I may not need to, but I just feel like I would like to ask at this point during the interview, so that it doesn't come as a surprise right after I'm hired. I need to take time off. So just very carefully and respectfully ask about that. You don't really want to ask about vacation time or really much in terms of benefits or pay during the initial interview. A lot of times they'll provide all that information anyway, and just take the stigma or the concern away from that. But again, during this initial interview, you want to communicate your interest in the company and in this position, and in highlighting what you can do for them. So that's going to be most important. Second interview is a little different, and you'll want to get into more discussion about nitty-gritties and benefits and things like that. So it really does depend which interview it is. Oh, this one is becoming actually more common these days. A lot of times I do get questions about, can I ask the interviewer to change my job description, or an employer to change my job description? And certainly, if you're in the interview process and you may be during your second interview, and some components of the job description may not even encompass everything that you envision. So you may want to address that and say, I really envision this job doing a little bit more of whatever area you feel like is not represented. And it may be that, it is actually a part, it's just not listed. They may respect your input and your desire to actually contribute more at the very least. You do not want to come across as demanding. Sometimes I work with people who, they really would like a telecommuting position, for example, but the employer isn't offering a telecommuting position. And I think a lot of times if you ask about that type of thing during an interview, it can really be taken the wrong way, and the employer can really feel like, oh, you don't want to show up at the office every day, you just want to sit at home in your pajamas and watch Oprah or something. If it's not the kind of culture where telecommuting is offered or common, it may not be appropriate to ask. So do your research before asking about any change in the job description. And again, just be very careful about how you do ask about it, and practice. Make sure that you're not coming across as being demanding or entitled or lazy. You don't want to come across as any of those things. Let's see. How should I say goodbye to my coworkers? That's a little different one. I don't get that one a lot, but sometimes, if you've recently resigned, you may not know how to leave the company. Let's say, what's the best way to leave the company and still maintain those connections? If you're leaving for, a better opportunity, you don't want to rub that in your coworkers' face, but you want to stay connected to them and make sure they remain in your network. So it may be appropriate, depending on your level of relationship and the culture there, to, have a get-together at your house, a barbecue in the backyard, a happy hour if that's something that you typically do, a lunch potluck at the office on your last day. You can certainly give them handwritten cards letting them know what they meant to you, and how helpful they were to you, and giving all your new contact information if you know it, or your personal contact information if that feels comfortable to you. But certainly it's appropriate to give handwritten notes to those you feel have helped you, or made your time at the company more meaningful or pleasant in any way. Handwritten notes are something that are not done enough today. People are so caught up in email and IM and texting that they do forget that you can send a handwritten card through snail mail, and you would be surprised the reaction that you get, not only in this instance, but with employers that you're applying to jobs for as well. So don't forget handwritten cards, or thank you notes, or notes, or even a letter is never a bad idea. So think about that. There's some simple ways to say goodbye or to say thank you to coworkers and supervisors too, who you want to use as a reference. Don't burn those bridges. You may need to climb over them. You never know when the new job's not going to work out too. So just be careful to maintain those relationships. You can never have enough people in your network. So I hope today's session was informative for you, and I know that you'll do a great job on your next interview. Keep watching the rest of the tips, and I look forward to seeing you next time. Please take advantage again of the free resources you'll find on the last slide of this presentation. Good luck in your job search, and I hope you'll let me know when you